Fascism suffered a military defeat in the Second World War. The alliance between Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japanese fascism was defeated in the war, and the fascist regimes in all three countries were eliminated. Hitler committed suicide. Mussolini was hanged by his own countrymen, and the government in Japan dissolved itself. Fascism arose in the first half of the 20th century, but collapsed before that century had reached its halfway point. However, that collapse did not mean that fascism had been entirely eradicated from the face of the earth. Following the Second World War, fascism began growing again in the Third World countries. The dictators and juntas that seized power in Latin America and Africa basically possessed fascist ideologies. The Chilean dictator Pinochet, who staged a bloody coup d'etat against the then head of state Allende in 1973, turned the country into a lake of blood. During the military junta in Argentina, thousands of opponents of the regime disappeared. It subsequently emerged that more than 2,000 political prisoners had been loaded onto planes and thrown into the sea off the Argentinian coasts from thousands of meters high. The savagery experienced in Guatemala was terrifying. The fascist regime that in 1954 overthrew the country's first and only elected president, Jacobo Arbenz, turned the country into a killing field in the 1960s and 70s. Fascist regimes that seized power in such Latin American countries as El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, and Paraguay perpetrated unbelievable slaughter. Similar fascist regimes remained in power for many years in such African countries as Zaire, Uganda, and South Africa. The regime in South Africa had a deeply racist ideology reminiscent of Nazi Germany. The blacks, the native inhabitants of the country who represented the majority of its population, were for decades exploited by the white minority in power. All these instances show what terrible consequences rule by despotic individuals can have. God makes reference to such people in the Quran. Whenever he holds the upper hand, he goes about the earth corrupting it, destroying people's crops and breeding stock. God does not love corruption. The defeat suffered by fascist ideology in the Second World War did not, as it is commonly believed, spell that ideology's total collapse. It is true that the most prominent representatives of fascism were removed from the scene, but paganism, Darwinism, the love of violence and racism, the foundations of fascism still remained. As a result of this, neo-Nazis and racist parties began becoming influential in Europe, especially in Germany.